Hey guys, and welcome. Episode 4 of the Halo TV series aired officially today, and in this video we're going to go over and cover it in a spoiler-free review, along with a full in-depth breakdown in the second part of the video. So make sure to check the timestamps in the description down below, and let's get into it. So episode 4 is pretty much just another expansion over Chief's life. Since he touched the keystone in episode 1, he's had visions of his past even before he was abducted through the Spartan 2 program, and this continues on through this episode. We also progress Quan Ha's story along with Finch as well, who is the antagonist in Madrigal, along with the Silver Team as well, and then becoming a little bit more aware of the strange things that are happening to the Chief after he touched the artifact after episode 1. Overall, to be honest, it was a good episode. Wasn't my favourite out of the lot, but I'd still say episode 1 and 3 were my top 2. But number 4 wasn't terrible, and again, it's just pretty much a story expansion episode. We're now also starting to get a lot of action scenes in these episodes, but it's not necessarily the action that we all want to see. We want UNSC versus Covenant combat like we see in the games and playing the games, but that was only really apparent in episode 1, and since episode 1, episode 3's kind of gone there with the Let Go Low, Marquis, and also the UNSC ship, but really we haven't seen much of that. So I suppose that's one of the disappointments from the series, but again, it's character building. It's building the story up as well for those that have never played the Halo games to understand more of the lore behind the Chief, Halsey, the UNSC, and then we'll get further into it when we see the Halo ring and when we're looking for it. So I can kind of understand why we've not had a lot of action yet, and when we do have action, that's when the series will really start to pick up. So going off for a bit of the combat that we do see in the episode, we do see a lot of the action on Madrigal between Soren and Quan Ha, and Quan Ha's family that are still there as well. So that's the only combat that we really do see in this episode, but it's interesting to say that we don't actually see the Covenant at all in this episode. Like, not once do we see the Covenant. So this is a sole human-based episode going into the different backstories of Silver Team, Chief, and also Quan Ha and her story as well. But yeah, we don't see the Covenant, Marquis, the Prophets, anyone in this episode, so that's also interesting to take into account. I'd probably suspect that in episode 5 we'll start to focus more on the Covenant due to their absence entirely in episode 4, and maybe from their side as well, with Marquis still being on the UNSC patrol ship. Potentially she's gone back to the Prophets and told them what she knows really, so that's probably where we're going to go with it. And in episode 5 I would suspect the Covenant will be a very big part of that episode and their journey of trying to find where the keystone is. So maybe Marquis goes back to Madrigal, I don't know. But nonetheless, I did enjoy episode 4. I'm liking the different approach the TV series is taking, and it's interesting to see some of the lore from the games and in some of the books and novels used in unique ways. Overall, another good episode which I did enjoy. As mentioned, not my favourite one out of the lot, but it's good, it's character building, and the story is getting pretty interesting as well. But anyway, now we're going to move on to the more of the spoiler review and a full breakdown of the episode. So if you are leaving us now and you don't want to be spoiled, then thank you all for clicking on the video and thank you all for watching. When you do get a chance to watch the episode, come back and let me know what you thought of episode 4 and yeah, your overall thoughts and opinions on the TV show in general. But anyway guys, let's get into the spoiler review. Okay, so the first scene in episode 4 shows an army of kids running through the mist. Now this goes on to show us the main Spartans on Silver Team, Soren, and also the Chief. So Riz, Vanek, Kai, Soren, and John. These are like the kids that were abducted as part of the Spartan 2 program, and they were taken through their vigorous training by the army commanders as well. We then cut to John as a kid who sat in some form of room or even a cell, the room that he was in during the previous episode, which is really interesting. Moments later, in walks Halsey, and John tells Halsey that he wants to go home. Halsey then responds with, "This is your home, John." John then goes on to tell Halsey that he was told by one of the fellow kids that they were all forced to be here, but he doesn't remember if that was true or not. Halsey then goes on to tell him that John actually chose to be there, and that it was almost acting like an orphanage. Now this is a big reference back to the Spartan 2 program where John was abducted during Halsey's project, etc. So this is a big thing as well, and Halsey goes on to tell John essentially that he's better than the rest, he possesses some form of power or gift, and that she wants him to lead all of the Spartans in the future. So he kind of smiles, and that's where it leaves off from there. We then cut to a scene with Chief and Halsey on the ship on their way to Eridanus 2. The Chief and Cortana get into a conversation. She mentions that the Chief's vitals are showing him that he's feeling anxious due to him removing the chip that suppressed his emotions in the previous episode. The Chief feels and sees everything in a completely different way and different light at the moment, and this is why his vitals don't really know how to react. We then cut to the ship, slipspace portaling outside of Eridanus 2, and damn. I've said this so many times and pretty much in every episode that I've covered, but the CGI is top notch in this series. It really is a work of art, and I've got to say, they've done a really good job. Anyway, we get past the intro scene and move on to Soren and Quan Ha on Madrigal. They then both get into a conversation, and Soren goes on to mention about the Spartan program, and that after he escaped, he had pretty much no memories of anything, and that they were all lost without them. It's then revealed that Soren actually killed his own father, and he remembered that after a couple of years later down the line after removing his nerve suppression chip. No details are shared at the time as to why or how, but yeah, it's interesting to take into account and probably one thing to remember for future episodes. We then cut to Reach where Kai is standing naked in front of the same mirror as the Chief, and it looks as though she's also trying to remove that chip in the back of her, which essentially suppresses your emotions. She removed it, and yeah, from then on, it gets really, really interesting. We then cut back to Eridanus 2 with Chief and Halsey, where they land in the team armor up and make their way in a warthog to where John had his visions. A little bit of homage was paid to the Halo Infinite stance that was essentially revealed to us in the 2018 reveal trailer back at E3, which I thought was really, really cool. And I'll put the comparison on screen now, which, yeah, a really nice touch. Halsey then tells John more about the planet and that the colony on here was led by his parents. And then, out of nowhere, John looks up and sees his old house, the ones from his visions, completely overgrown by nature. However, then the camera pans over to Halsey and it just shows the concerned look on her face, looking like she doesn't want John to find out exactly what happened. We move to a location where essentially John thought that the artifact was being buried by him and his father, so they move over to that location and begin digging. After this, we cut back to Madrigal with Quan Ha and Soren. They're going back to the place where the Covenant invaded Quan Ha's small village, and this is where we see the new rebel antagonist, Finch. Finch leaves, and then Soren and Quan Ha enter, taking more of a stealthy approach so that no one can see that she's alive directly and essentially report it, so she has a hood up walking through. We then see that she tried to speak to someone called Atu, but it didn't want to speak or acknowledge her existence at all because Quan actually had a bounty on her head, and if anyone found her, they would be rewarded for bringing her in or even killing her. After this part, we then cut back to Reach, and we can see Kai sitting on her bed, polishing her gear. Kai essentially can see things in a completely different way now that she's removed her neural chip. She decides to dye her hair pink as well, which is not something the Spartans should even have a thought about doing. In the previous episode, Miranda Keyes was tasked to review the Keystone and just look into it a bit further, see exactly what it was and see if she could find anything else about it, and essentially do it separately to what Halsey's doing. So it was like a secret objective for her to do. Miranda wanted Silver Team to essentially touch the object and review their vitals and see if they had any effects like the Chief had, but all of them touched it and nothing happened because the Chief is essentially what they say is the blessed one. We then move back to Eridanus 2 where the Chief is digging for the object. He finds a white locked box under the soil. John pulls it up and opens it, and it contains drawings from John's visions. Drawings of the Keystone. This is where the Chief's seen a drawing of the Halo ring for the first time as well, which was really cool. He then goes inside his old parents' house to look around and see if there's anything that he could find or even remember at the time. Now, back onto Madrigal. The rebels were having a memorial for Quan Ha's father when she turned up alongside many of others. She then starts to kick off in front of everyone, saying that everyone are traitors and that the ones that were truly by her father were killed previously, but the ones that remain were rather on Finch's payroll, or they were just not loyal to her father. A short time later, Finch and his forces show up, and the area was completely evacuated. I really hope that she doesn't get Soren killed, man. Like, I love Soren, I think he's such a cool character, and Quan Ha's story is so underwhelming to me that I just hope that nothing stupid happens in order to get him killed, so I'd be pretty annoyed if that is the case. Now back to Eridanus 2 with the Chief entering his old family home. Halsey gave the Chief a disclaimer about seeing things that might not seem right. In other words, if they see them abducting the Chief or John when he was younger in a part of the Spartan 2 program, don't jump to conclusions. That was essentially what she was saying. Cortana uploads an augmented reality version of what the house used to look like back then, which by the way is really cool, and it's a really nice touch to show what the Mjolnir armor is actually capable of. From his visions, the Chief starts to rearrange the house, and we can see exactly what it looks like from inside his helmet, which again, a really cool touch. I love this sort of stuff, and I'm really glad that they've tried to take that next step with this as well, with the different camera angles and just the different way that it looks, yeah, it's really cool. Now we see John walk around the house and we can essentially see what it looked like from when he was a child, and all of his drawings on the walls, his mother, his father, even his dog, everything was how it was meant to be. One part also that's really important to note is that the chief tries to walk into a section of the house that just wouldn't load. And Cortana mentioned that there wasn't enough data for her to make up what the room looked like. Almost like it was where John was abducted and that the UNSC destroyed all of the data from that space. So that's something we haven't explored properly yet, but maybe in the future John goes back to this location and all is revealed, so definitely one to take into account. Now John started having more flashbacks during this augmented reality moment, and these were from his childhood, his parents, his dog, and just generally what happened in the house. The chief has a vision of his younger self drawing these pictures on a table, and he's kind of essentially looking over this kid's shoulder at what he's drawing. He then has another vision where his whole family are having a picnic, and the chief runs off with his dog and comes across this giant solar farm. He goes inside and comes to a cliff edge, and goes deeper and deeper inside this cliff and inside this cave that he finds. He then finds something crazy. He finds the second keystone. Bearing in mind this was the chief as a child, so at the time he didn't know what it was. But he touches it, it goes all green like it did previously in the episodes, and then he runs back to his parents and goes back to the chief standing over his younger self. Now the chief hears something over his shoulder, so he gets up and walks up the stairs into the kitchen, and this is where he sees his younger self sitting on the countertop with Halsey talking to him as a younger child. Halsey asks John if he can keep a secret, and all of these flashbacks were being watched over by John. So now he knows that Halsey was in his family home when his parents were still alive, so wondering what's going on there, and John was very concerned at this point. So concerned that he took his helmet off and stormed out of the house. Now we switch back to Silver Team, who are still with Miranda Keyes as she's logging her testing. Kai is acting strange for a Spartan, as we already know, with her removing her chip. They mention this one word, I'm not even going to try to pronounce it, but essentially it's another word for the Needler, or when they pick up the Needler. This is the word the Covenant would typically say to the Spartans when in combat. But it sparks something in Miranda's head. It lines up perfectly with the communications that Marquis sent back to the Prophets in the previous episode aboard the UNSC patrol ship. We now move to Madrigal, where Soren and Quan Ha are watching over some rebels that have broken into Soren's ship, and they're taking and literally scavenging everything that they can. Soren wants out of Madrigal and he wants to go back to the rubble, and he tells this to Quan. But Quan then said that if he wants to get paid, that he needs to visit her aunt. She controls all of the family's money. We then cut to Finch in a bath, naked. Like a lot of the things in this TV show. A lady called Franco joined Finch in this area on Madrigal. Finch then tells Franco of Quan Ha on the planet, and also Soren as well, who's here to essentially protect her. He wants them both assassinated, and then asks Franco to assassinate them both for him, an expert in business. Soren and Quan were then ambushed, and Soren goes to town on them both. But it turns out this was actually Quan Ha's aunt's guards. So yeah, that was a bit of a turn. They then hug, and she tells Quan and Soren to follow her into some secret part of Madrigal. Now, going back to the lab with Silver Team, Kai starts to show more of an emotional side, which for Miranda at first is a little strange to take. The Silver Team go on to say that they were once each given a pet. Kai was given a puppy called Cody, Riz was given a cat called Eloise, and Vanek was given a pig called Ivan. They would then spend days in the woods tracking, hiding, and eating whatever they could find. Whichever side failed, essentially lost their pets. Halsey had the losers kill their own pets. Damn man, that's pretty rough. Vanek then went on to mention that he never lost an objective in his life, he won every single one of them. But even still, Halsey eliminated his pet. Miranda was horrified about hearing this, and of course Miranda is the daughter of Halsey, so this was a pretty tough one for her to take. We then go back to the Chief and Halsey on Aridness 2, where the Chief has just stormed out of the house and onto the balcony of his family home. The Chief talks to Halsey and tells him what he saw in his visions. The Chief wonders why she was there, even when his parents were still alive. Halsey tries to play it off and tells the Chief that it's normal for memories to get muddled when having visions. The Chief takes it and enters the house again. Now, back to Madrigal. Soren's ship was completely ripped apart and scrapped by the rebels, as we know. The only way off is for a transport ship that takes off only at night. However, this transport ship is 200 miles south of Madrigal. Quan Ha then finds out that her father had literally no money left at all. It was all spent on the rebellion between himself and Finch. Quan was insistent to help and wanted to fight for what was right. But the aunt then says something really interesting, in that Quan's father fought for a lie. Before the war, Quan's father was visited by a group in the desert, better known as the Desert People. Whilst this conversation was happening, Franco was tracking them down and was essentially taking out all of the guards in their way. Franco then tracks them down and essentially kills Quan's aunt within this room that they were hiding in. Sora manages to find them and get a connecting bullet off to Franco before she escapes out of the window. It was then time for Soren and Quan to get out of Madrigal. They then get on the bike that Soren stole and they just got out of there. In a high-speed chase in a Halo series. It wouldn't be a movie without one. Cortana analysed Chief's brain scans and essentially Halsey looked shocked when looking at them. She's reopened neural clusters showing emotions and memory at the same time, which again for a Spartan shouldn't be the case. The Chief then walks up to Halsey and says that he knows where the second object is on Aridness and he knows exactly where they need to go. Jump in the Warhog and they make their way there. Now back on Reach, Miranda is analysing Marky's communication. This is where they see the translation Sacred Ring, and this is where Kai says that it's Halo. And then we got Halo music playing in the background, and I've got to say, this isn't canon in terms of like the game, but this sent shivers down my spine. It was so cool. Miranda then says that Dr. Halsey designs her subjects in very specific ways and in very specific specifications. If anything or anyone acts up or acts weird, she becomes very concerned and just uncomfortable. For example, if they act human. The Chief and Halsey then enter the hole that he's seen in his visions, and there it is, the second keystone. And boom, episode over. So we've now seen the second keystone in episode 5. I'm sure that we'll see it more. And this is, again, there was no Covenant in this episode at all. So I believe episode 5 will probably focus around their story more and their journey of trying to find out where the keystone is and what happened to it. I just can't wait to see the Halo ring, man. I cannot wait. But I enjoyed it nonetheless. It's becoming more intriguing about the Chief finding out about the Spartan 2 program and seeing what Halsey will do about it, and just seeing essentially the Chief's backstory and outlining that lore and canon as well, which I thought that was really cool. Gotta be honest though, Quan Ha's story is at the bottom of my am I bothered list, because I don't care at all about Quan Ha or her story. I don't know what it is. I just don't care, to be honest. I really don't. I think that Soren is cool. I like the UNSC. I like the Silver Team. I like the Spartans. But Quan's story does not bother me at all. I'm probably not the only one that it feels like that. But I don't want it to be focused so much about Quan's story. I kind of want her to just like join the things and sort of be a part of another faction story like the UNSC or Silver Teams, and not necessarily have her own. Maybe in Season 2 they'll outline this and change it slightly, but that's just the way that I feel, and I know that a lot of people are also feeling the same. But I like what they did with Kai, that rebellious Spartan that's again finding out things for herself as well, and maybe the other Spartans will do the same. Maybe Kai will tell the other two part of the Silver Team the same thing, so maybe that's how it's going to go. But guys, do drop a like on today's video, subscribe if you are brand new, and let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. I'll speak to you all guys in the next one.